What's up, guys? We're talking about the Fantasy label. Fantastic green vinyl for their very first release. Most of their stuff was red. They also mixed in blue, although I think blue became for later for stereo. But they have a myriad of different colors over the time, which was pretty cool and kind of sets Fantasy apart from everybody else. You know, old Fantasy presses are going to be colored vinyl. It's a great way to know if it's old. If it's black, that shit came out later. This is 3201 or 3-201. The dash comes out eventually and it just becomes 3201. Fantasy Records, great little label from the Bay Area. A real Latin tinge to some of what they do. Cal Tjader, of course, is the one who really drives that home. It's the home of Dave Brubeck in 53 through probably more like 51 through 55. And then he gets signed by Columbia, and of course that was really tough on Fantasy, but Fantasy had it coming. Of course, Brubeck was an initial partner in Fantasy. The Weiss brothers came in and sold him a bill, but didn't really deliver. He ended up finding out he didn't own as much of the material as he thought he did. I think he had licensed to half of his own and nothing else that Fantasy recorded, which wasn't what he thought. So Brubeck eventually moved on to Columbia, where he probably got paid 4 or 5 times as much, and has become one of the true ambassadors of jazz to white America. Brubeck's a great player. He plays actually with some blues for a white guy. And Paul Desmond, of course, is the real anchor in the Brubeck sound. That wonderful ethereal alto that Paul Desmond plays is fantastic. And Time Out is one of the most wonderful jazz songs ever. It shows up in films, television shows. It just has such a great vibe to it. And it's so ubiquitous that it's actually out there selling jazz. And we need more people and more things out there selling jazz. Jazz shouldn't just be something to make people cringe. It should be something that makes you feel cool. And Time Out does that. It's absolutely one of the coolest sounding tracks ever. And I challenge people to listen to it again for the first time. You've heard it infinite times, but close your eyes, put on Time Out, headphones, loud in the room, whatever, and just really listen to it. It gives you a lot of great visual pictures and imagery. It's pretty fantastic. It's not going to really tell you a lot of social constructs, but it'll certainly inform you about some of the wonderful things that jazz allows you to do, compositionally, arrangement-wise. Fantastic. Anyway, enough of Brubeck. Brubeck was a big part of the Fantasy story. And of course, Fantasy ends up becoming the Creedence Clearwater story. And then Fantasy is the label that also starts buying out the other failing jazz labels and launches OJC in the 80s. But as far as 3201 goes, this is Woody Herman's Heard. I think it's like his third Heard. And the group is in Paris. And it's got a great album cover. I love that mid-50s look, the typography, just the map of the city in the background, the diamond shapes. Everything about that imagery to me is wonderful in a dated sense. It's not like the Reed Miles stuff where it still looks so incredibly modern. Like that could have been done yesterday. This definitely feels like it's from the era that it's from. I Dream of Jeannie's not far away. I Love Lucy's in the corner. And it's not like Herman Lubinsky's Savoy stuff where it looks so cheap. This looks thought out. There were some graphic design elements put into it. And I think it's fantastic with the green vinyl. And there's some good players on this record. My paper sleeve is absolutely shot. I should replace that. The great Bill Perkins is on this. Wonderful player. Ralph Burns is on the piano, probably doing some of the arrangements. Jerry Coker, Dick Hafer, Jean-Louis Vial, Dick Collins, Cy Toof, the great trumpet players on this. Red Kelly's playing the bass. So there's some really great talent. That I, of course, played with Woody Herman's groups. And Herman is a kind of a launching pad in almost a Blakey sense for a lot of the great white Western players. You know, they all kind of have a lineage to the Woody Herman's groups, and were a lot of really fierce players that learned to be combative in that group, and then often went out and did great things on their own. So great early Fantasy. I bought this in Chicago at Fantasy Records for $6. Original Deep Groove, green vinyl. And that's clear evidence that you can find great old jazz records for a great price, with great packaging, great looks, that sound great. You don't gotta pay $500. Dig it out. There's a lot of stories in the jazz history book that need to be read, and there's a few chapters that get read too much. And that's okay. You know, we all gotta start somewhere, but we need to dig deeper into the history of jazz, because it's honestly telling the American story. And people comment on all the time how much I include history and race and social aspects into this music, because this music is talking about all that stuff. This music's because of all that stuff. It's not separate from it. It's interwoven through all of that fabric. It's almost like you can't talk about one without the other. So that's the Jazz Journal, talking about fantasy records. Every month we're going to do a record from these labels, one record from each label. And I want everybody to hopefully start to get to know what all these labels brought to the table. And I think by the time we've done 10 episodes of the Jazz Journal, people should have a pretty cool idea of each of these labels' repertoire and artists and discography. And we're only going to dig deeper and deeper. So I appreciate you all. Be safe. Talk to you soon.